Hello and welcome back to Retfurb. So on today's video I've got this Cannondale F700 and it's got a set of Cannondale Headshok DD60 model forks on it that are pretty much stuck solid. So I'm going to be showing the process on these and what I did to get them working again. Now you'll see as we go along they're not great inside. They could have ideally been, some of the parts being replaced, but they're okay. They'll go again. I don't think personally they're worth buying loads of new parts for them, so I'm just going to get them cleaned up. I'm going to do the damper and get that all changed, get the oil changed on that and get it working okay. So you can see at the moment I'm just knocking out the shock, so just using a rubber mallet, just carefully knocking that out, and then you can see there that's removed and the bearing's still on there. So I'm just going to remove the boot first. So I'm just going to cut off these cable ties and have a quick look and see what it looks like underneath. Give you an idea of what the fork's like. So you can see there it's pretty grotty. It's not the worst one I've seen. I did a set once before on YouTube and showed just how bad they can get if they're not serviced properly. These ones are not as bad as that, although they are stuck solid. So the first thing you need to do is undo the top cap. So you just need the pin tool to do that. And you can see here I'm just undoing, just gradually releasing that part. So you can see it's solid. Normally you can slide down this outer tube and push it downwards towards the fork bottom, but it's just stuck solid, so that ain't gonna work. So I'm just gonna undo this bottom lock ring. And then what I'm hoping to do with this is undo the lock ring, spray a load of lubricant in there. I've got some WD-40 that I'm going to spray inside, and just hopefully that'll help. As you can see, hopefully that'll help with just lubing it up a little bit enough to get, to allow it to move. I think what's happened is the needle bearings and the flat bearings, they've just stuck together in a situation that hasn't been used probably for a while. And I should imagine there's probably a little bit of a groove in the bearings, which is be caused by that, and probably moisture that's been in there and it's just corroded. So yeah, you can see it's still not moving, doesn't want to move at all. So I'm just going to give it a few little light taps. Obviously you need to be careful with this, you don't want to damage anything. This locking ring, you don't want to damage it, so just carefully giving it little taps just to see if it will move, and you can see it is gradually moving. You don't want to go too mad. Obviously if it's locked solid you're going to need to give it a little bit more, but if it gets to that point it's probably knackered inside. So I'm just giving it some light taps here, just working it up and down, trying to make it move, and you can see it is. So at this point it's quite promising. I'm just spraying in a little bit more WD-40 inside. So now the thing is, when I was tapping it, these flat bearings are wanting to move, so I'm trying to put this tool in between the bearing and the fork just to stop it from sliding. You can see it's moving with it, obviously where it's locked in place, which I don't want to happen. So I'm just going to put this in place while I knock it, obviously making sure that I'm not causing any damage to that flat bearing when I do it. Just gradually working it. It is getting better and better. The more I do it, the more easy it's moving, and you can see there it's sort of come off of those flat washers now, and obviously the needles are moving inside. So now I've got it down enough that you can just see the castle nut you need to undo. So ordinarily you would remove the black outer part, but I'm going to undo the white section on this just to remove the inside of the cartridge first. Now don't ask me why I did it that way. I just decided to do it when I was doing these forks. I'm going to be giving the damper a service anyway, so it doesn't really matter if the oil comes out now. So just undoing that white section, as you can see. So like I say, normally you would use a special tool and that would go round and that would get the outer part of the damper undone, and then you can pull the whole lot out in one go. So with this, for some reason while I was doing it, I decided to do it that way. But anyway, that isn't going to matter too much. At the moment you're going to have to take that out before this comes off anyway, so yeah, bit of a random way of doing it, I know, but yeah, we'll get back to it. So now you can see that I'm using that tool just to undo the outer bit. I should have done this in the first place, but anyway, I'm doing it now. You can take the whole lot in one piece like I just said, but just doing it this way, it's probably easier, to be honest. You can probably get in there easier. I'd made this tool up just out of an old socket. You can buy the actual special tool for it, but just making this, it's fine. Obviously you want to make sure there's no burrs or anything on there that you're going to damage anything inside. You need to make sure that it's not going to scratch any of the threads or damage that. So yeah, once you've done that, you can then unscrew it pretty easily and just pull the other part of the damper out. You can see there I'm just demonstrating the tool going in. So yeah, it does the job. Now I'm just going to slide over a bit of inner tube that I've cut off, and this will just hold the bearings in place. So you need to make sure when you strip it all down, you know which bearings go with what. They've all got to go back in the same place. If you don't do that, you might have issues afterwards. So yeah, you just need to make sure you know exactly which one goes where and with what. So there'll be 3 parts to each section. So there'll be an inner flat bearing, a needle bearing, and the outer flat bearing that goes inside this tube which slides. And I'm just pushing some material down inside the top just to hold those in place. I find that easier. In the manual it actually tells you to cut a bit of inner tube, put that down and blow it up, but I just find it easier just to put something down in and it'll hold it in place. As long as you ram something in there tight, it'll hold that in place. And you can see here I'm just taking these off, making sure I know exactly where they go. Now this bit of footage I'm actually showing you now isn't the fork that I started with. For some reason I lost that bit of footage, so I've just quickly snipped in this bit, but it's exactly the same process. This was on a set of fatty forks, but the process is exactly the same, just making sure you're keeping those bearings with the, you know, all the parts together, and you know exactly what part of that fork it comes off of. So now back to the DD60s. So now I've just got a bit of wire wool and some WD-40, and I'm just going over, just trying to make the best of what we have here. Again, these forks are not great, but they're not worth a hell of a lot. You know, I suppose if you had a real sentimental value in them, and you know you wanted to keep them absolutely immaculate and they wanted to be perfect, then you could replace all the bearings. Personally, I don't think it's worth it on these, so I'm just going to clean them up. You can see they're not that great, and they've got some sort of grooves in where they've been sat there. You can just see there's like a black bit. And here closer up, it's made slight grooves. It shouldn't really affect the use when they're back together. It might be a little bit notchy, but you can also go over it with a bit of like wet and dry sandpaper, which I do later on just to try and smooth that out a little bit. But I'm just going through the process now, just showing briefly what I did with cleaning, just going over some solvent-based degreaser, cleaning everything out, making sure there's no old grease or dirt or anything like that in there. Any sort of moisture that's left in there, you want to get that out. You can see here I'm now just bringing out the spring with the elastomer that's inside, and that's pretty grotty, as you can see. So I'm going to replace the elastomer. I've got some polyurethane rod that I bought, but I've had to sort of shave it down to fit inside the spring because the spring's tapered. So if you do get some rods, you just need to be sort of mindful of that, unless you buy the actual proper piece to go in there. But yeah, you can see this is knackered. This bit is just breaking up into bits. Just using a screwdriver, just trying to get all those bits out and just clean it out. That's the only problem with some of these old forks, not necessarily just the Cannondale forks, but other forks with elastomers in. They just deteriorate over the years. And they just don't last. Just putting some Teflon grease on this, just to slide it in. Now I normally use Teflon grease with forks like this with the elastomers, because I just find that it doesn't sort of cause any issues. I haven't had any issues with it anyway. I don't know if anyone else has had issues using Teflon, but I haven't. And then on the outside of the fatty forks, and I'll use like a multi-purpose grease. So you can see here, like I was saying just a minute ago, I'm just using a bit of wet and dry sandpaper. I think it was 1500 grade, just to try and smooth them out a little bit. I'm not going mental, but just to smooth those grooves out and try and make it a bit more flatter than what it was. So now putting on the boot, and then we can start putting the pieces on for the bearings. I always like to smear a little bit of grease on before I put the flat bearings on, purely to help with corrosion again. That's the main issue really. I'm just putting them on dry. I just find putting a little bit of grease on there. I know you do run the risk of them moving slightly when you're doing that. It makes it a little bit more trickier probably when you're putting it together because they want to move around. But that's the way I always do it. Whether you want to leave it, not do that, it's entirely up to you. But I would personally do it. I've done it on all the other forks that I've done on the videos, and I've never had any issues with them. And then just smearing some grease all around the outside of them. Once they're all back together, I always smear some grease at the bottom as well, just to give it a bit more down the bottom and behind the boot. That's the most sort of prone area that you're going to get issues with water going in. So if you've got a bit of grease around there, that should help. And now just sliding those needle bearings back in place. So you're supposed to have 11 bearings, roller bearings, proud from the top of the tube. Now most of the time it's fine, but I have had a couple where it needs a slight bit of adjustment where there's been play in it. I've had someone else messaging me on another video that I did, and they've had a bit of play on theirs. So I recommended them just to move the needle bearings down slightly, and then it stops the up and down play. It might just be that they've moved and they've been put back in, so that's just something to be mindful of. Obviously you've got to hold them in place. You can wrap a cable tie around the bottom of the needle bearings as well, just to stop them sliding down. That does help. I've just got the inner tube here, but yeah, like I say, it's supposed to be 11, so if you do 11 that should be fine. But if you find that it has got a bit of play, you can slide that down slightly, and then most of the time that rectifies the issue. It's done it for every time that I've done it. I've done probably about 4 or 5 of these now, and on a couple of them where it did it, I adjusted them down. It was absolutely fine afterwards. So that's just something to look out for when you are doing it, if you notice it get issues. And as you can see, I'm just sliding now the outer tube on to the inner, and again I've got everything held in place like I did when I took it apart, and you can see it's moving pretty nice now. And now we can put that lock ring back on. I'm just doing that up with a pin tool. So I'm not expecting these forks to be perfect when they're done, but I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be, they'll go on for a lot longer now. I had some people moaning about one of the videos I did when I think it was DD50s that I did, and they were just so bad I didn't even bother with them. They were so rusted, so pitted. And people were saying, oh, you could have just greased them up or, put some sort of lubricant in there, which, yeah, you might have done, and they might have carried on for a while, but I didn't think they were worth it. They were rough. If they were like this, I would have carried on, and I would have redone them and, gave it a go. These were sort of, getting on towards being too bad, but they were okay. But yeah, the other one's just so bad. I just didn't think it was worth it, so I didn't bother. And it was just a good way to show people the importance of maintenance on these Headshok forks. Checking behind the boots, especially, that'll give you an idea of the condition of what they are inside. If they're rough under the boots, chances are they're probably rough up into the bearings. So now I've done the main part of the forks. I've secured the rubber back in place. Now I'm going to get on with the damper. So now with these ones, you basically fill the lowers up with oil as much as it will take until it starts sort of coming out the top, and you screw it in. You've got a little bleed screw on the side, and that's it. They're pretty simple really. You need to make sure that all the air is out of it. So you can see now I'm starting the process. I've cleaned it all. So you push the inner part in so it's sealed at the bottom. You need to make sure that you don't pull it out, and because you'll just get the oil pull out the bottom. And now I'm just filling up with the fork oil, and then you just pump it to make sure that the air is sort of coming out the top. Another good idea when you do this, which I don't actually show on here, and it was fine without doing it, is to fill it right up and then leave it sat for an hour. Just let the air come out. I've had others where I've done it like I'm doing now, haven't left it, and then they haven't been quite right, and then I've gave it a bit of time to sit before I fully assemble it, and then they've been perfect. So you just sometimes need a little bit longer to let that air that's stuck at the bottom just come out. Obviously with it being thick oil, it's yeah, it can take a little bit longer to bleed through, even with pumping it. So yeah, you can see there the oil's right up to the top. You can see there's some air bubbles there. So now you can push the piston down, and this little screw part at the top that seals it, you screw that in. You'll notice the oil will start coming out as you're doing it. So just locking that down. Now with these I didn't go fully down. I then released the screw on the side, which you'll see in a minute, and then I fully locked them down. Now you can just fully lock it if you wanted at this point, but I thought it'd be best just to let that bleed screw off slightly. So as I'm screwing it down, because you've obviously got the seal in that top bit anyway, which will be pushing pressure in that system now as you're screwing it down. So the oil will come out that little screw. And then just nipping that screw back up, and that's it. And you can see it's damping okay, and just check the adjustment that it locks. So yeah, that looks pretty good. You're going to get ever so slight movement. And once it's in the fork, then it will operate correctly. Just wiping off some of the oil on the outside before we screw it back in, and just sliding that rod back in place. So there's a small little rubber ring that I've replaced on there as well, an O-ring that I was just pointing to then, which then will, as you screw it down in, that just locks that in place. So now you'll need that special tool, or you can use, as I'm doing here, I'm using the pin tool and just carefully screwing that right. If you can get the pin tool in there enough, if you can pull that outer sleeve down enough that you can get the pin tool in, then I've done that a few times and it's been okay. Ideally you want to use the special tool if you've got it. I just lock it in place with the pin tool and it was fine. It locked in nice and tight. And then we can get the top screwed back on. So yeah, that's basically it now. Once this is done, once this is screwed back down in place, that's the forks all done. Yeah, ideal if you've got some forks that have seized, this is what you need to do. To be honest, the process on all the fatty forks and the DD forks and Headshok, they're all pretty much the same. There's not a hell of a lot of deviation from it. You've got a bit. Most of the time it's in the damper, which is the difference. But other than that, they're pretty much, similar. All the ones I've done have been pretty similar, and that's like the fatty forks, the DD50, the DD60. Yeah, there's not really been any sort of major differences. So now they're back on the bike and you can just see they're, working all okay now, and we can check the lockout, and yeah, perfect. So that's it. So I hope that's helped. If you've got the issue, if you need to ask any more questions, please let me know and I'll do my best to answer. And once again, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. It's really appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.